My friends, the Steelers' offense may be on the verge of its biggest identity shift in years, and the more details that emerge about Mike McCarthy's philosophy, the clearer it becomes that Pittsburgh is preparing to play a very different brand of football. This isn't simply about bringing in a new play caller, it's about rebuilding the entire offensive structure around a quarterback-friendly system that emphasizes efficiency, rhythm, and balance. If everything develops the way McCarthy envisions, Steelers fans could be watching an offense that finally looks modern while still embracing the physical identity the franchise has always been known for. One of the first things that stands out is McCarthy's own description of his philosophy. He has repeatedly emphasized that his offense is quarterback-centric. Everything begins with making life easier for the quarterback while still maintaining a commitment to running the football. That sounds simple, but for Pittsburgh, it's a major departure from what fans have become accustomed to over the past several seasons. McCarthy understands that if Aaron Rodgers is going to succeed, the offense can't ask him to carry the entire workload every Sunday. Instead, the running game has to become reliable enough to create balance and force defenses to respect every aspect of the offense. The biggest challenge, however, is obvious. The Steelers simply haven't been an elite rushing team in recent years. McCarthy's preferred outside zone running scheme demands much more than simply having talented running backs. It requires an offensive line capable of operating as a one unit. Outside zone depends heavily on communication, timing, combination blocks, and linemen working together before climbing to the second level. Those details cannot be mastered overnight. They require countless repetitions, and that's why the development of the offensive line during training camp could end up determining just how successful this offense becomes in 2026. If that unit develops quickly, the ripple effects could transform everything else. Once defenses begin respecting the run, the passing game naturally opens up. And that's where Aaron Rodgers enters the conversation. Rodgers isn't walking into an unfamiliar system. In many ways, he's returning to concepts that helped define his Hall of Fame career. McCarthy's offense has always featured strong West Coast principles built around timing, quick decisions, horizontal stretches, crossing routes, screens, and getting the football into the hands of playmakers in space. Those concepts perfectly match Rodgers' strengths. His ability to diagnose defenses before the snap, adjust protections, and make changes at the line of scrimmage has always been one of the greatest strengths of his game. That freedom is expected to return in Pittsburgh. Unlike systems that ask quarterbacks to simply execute called plays, McCarthy traditionally gives his quarterback significant responsibility before the snap. Rodgers has spent years mastering those adjustments, and that familiarity could dramatically shorten the learning curve despite the fact that this is a completely new offense for many of the players around him. Still, one major question remains unanswered. Can this version of Aaron Rodgers push the football downfield consistently? Last season, Rodgers finished with the lowest average air yards per target in the NFL, an indication that the passing game leaned heavily toward shorter throws instead of attacking defenses vertically. Whether that was because of personnel, philosophy, or simply Rodgers protecting himself remains open to debate. McCarthy's history suggests he'd like to change that. During his time in Dallas, his offense incorporated more vertical concepts, including 4 vertical routes, smash concepts, and aggressive attacks designed to stretch defenses deep. If those ideas carry over into Pittsburgh, Steelers fans may finally see an offense capable of threatening every blade of grass instead of living almost exclusively underneath opposing coverages. Perhaps the biggest difference fans could notice is something that has frustrated many observers for years: the use of the middle of the field. Under the previous offensive structure, attacking the middle often felt surprisingly limited. McCarthy's offenses, however, have consistently featured crossing routes, intermediate throws, and layered concepts designed specifically to exploit that area of the defense. That could become especially important because Pittsburgh now has multiple larger receiving targets capable of winning in those spaces. Instead of relying almost entirely on smaller receivers working outside or underneath, the offense suddenly has options that naturally fit McCarthy's preferred passing concepts. Bigger targets working between the numbers could force defenses into difficult decisions while also creating opportunities for explosive plays after the catch. Of course, none of that matters if the protection doesn't hold long enough. Some of McCarthy's deeper route combinations require patience. Rodgers will have to remain comfortable standing in the pocket while those routes develop, trusting both his offensive line and the timing of the system. If that chemistry develops throughout camp, the Steelers may finally possess an offense capable of consistently generating explosive passing plays instead of relying solely on methodical drives. Another fascinating element involves personnel versatility. While McCarthy brings his own offensive philosophy, he also inherits coaches with different backgrounds, including Brian Angelicchio. That combination could introduce more flexibility than Steelers fans initially expected. Multiple tight end formations, heavier personnel packages, under center play action, and varied formations all appeared to be realistic possibilities. In fact, early signs suggest Pittsburgh may lean much more heavily into play action than it has in recent seasons. Throughout off-season practices, there has reportedly been a significant amount of work from under center. That isn't accidental. Under center footwork requires repetition, and coaching staffs typically emphasize those mechanics early when they intend to feature them prominently during the regular season. If that trend continues, it could represent another massive evolution for the offense. Play action not only creates easier throwing windows, but also slows pass rushers, freezes linebackers, simplifies quarterback reads, and allows route combinations to develop against compromised coverages. It's one of the most efficient tools available in modern NFL offenses, and it has arguably been underutilized by Pittsburgh in recent years. Even more importantly, the Steelers appear to have the personnel necessary to maximize those concepts. With talented tight ends already under contract and significant investments made at the position, there is every reason to believe those players will become much larger parts of the offensive game plan rather than simply functioning as complementary pieces. Everything points toward an offense designed to be far more unpredictable than what Steelers fans have watched recently. The commitment to the running game, the return of familiar concepts for Aaron Rodgers, the emphasis on attacking the middle of the field, the increased use of play action, and the possibility of multiple personnel groupings all suggest Pittsburgh is preparing to unveil an offense that looks dramatically different from previous seasons. But the biggest question still hasn't been answered. All of these ideas sound promising on paper, yet training camp and the regular season will ultimately reveal whether this collection of new coaches, new concepts, and new personnel can come together quickly enough to turn potential into production. Do you believe Mike McCarthy's offensive system is exactly what Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers needed, or do you think there are still too many unanswered questions for this offense to take the next step? The same philosophy extends beyond formations and route concepts. One of the biggest reasons there is so much optimism surrounding this offense is because McCarthy's system has historically allowed quarterbacks to control the game before the snap. Aaron Rodgers built his career mastering those responsibilities, and that could become one of Pittsburgh's greatest advantages this season. Instead of simply lining up and running the play exactly as it was called, Rodgers is expected to have significant freedom to identify defensive fronts, adjust protections, change the play when necessary, and attack favorable matchups. That kind of flexibility can completely change how an offense functions. Defenses are forced to disguise coverages more carefully because Rodgers has spent years proving he can punish predictable looks before the ball is ever snapped. But what may be even more exciting is how the supporting cast appears to fit the system far better than many people realize. DK Metcalf naturally draws attention from opposing defenses, and that alone creates opportunities for everyone else on the field. Defenses simply cannot afford to leave him isolated very often. That forces safeties to shade in his direction or dedicate extra help over the top, opening windows elsewhere. In McCarthy's offense, those secondary windows become extremely valuable because the passing concepts are designed to stretch defenders horizontally before attacking the space they leave behind. The Steelers also appear positioned to feature much more variety than fans have seen in recent seasons. Rather than relying on one or two favorite concepts over and over again, McCarthy has consistently shown throughout his coaching career that he is comfortable mixing personnel groupings, changing formations, and forcing defenses to prepare for multiple offensive identities. Some drives may feature heavier packages with multiple tight ends, emphasizing physical football and the running game. Others may spread the field with shotgun formations and let Rodgers dictate the tempo from the line of scrimmage. That ability to change personalities without changing personnel could become one of Pittsburgh's biggest offensive strengths. Play action should play a massive role in that evolution. When an offense successfully establishes the run, linebackers naturally become more aggressive, stepping toward the line of scrimmage. Safeties hesitate for just a split second. Those tiny reactions often create enormous throwing lanes behind them. McCarthy understands that better than most offensive coaches, which explains why so much attention has been placed on under center work throughout offseason practices. For years, Steelers fans have wanted to see an offense that consistently puts defenses in conflict rather than simply reacting to whatever coverage is presented. Play action does exactly that. Defenders are forced to choose between respecting the run or dropping into coverage quickly enough to defend intermediate routes. If they guess wrong, explosive plays become become available almost immediately. Another important aspect is how much easier these concepts can make life for the quarterback. Rather than asking Rodgers to diagnose every defender individually after the snap, play action often simplifies the progression. Instead of reading a specific defender's movement first, quarterbacks can work through designed route progressions that naturally develop as the fake influences the defense. That may not sound dramatic, but over the course of an entire season, those simplified reads can eliminate hesitation, speed up decision making, and reduce unnecessary pressure on both the quarterback and the offensive line. Physical football also appears ready to return as a true offensive identity. McCarthy has made no secret that he wants Pittsburgh to embrace the AFC North mentality. He wants a team capable of imposing its will, controlling the line of scrimmage, and wearing defenses down over 4 quarters. That doesn't mean abandoning modern offensive principles. Instead, it's about combining physicality with efficiency. If the Steelers can successfully run outside zone, mix in under center play action, attack the middle of the field, and allow Rodgers to orchestrate everything before the snap, the offense suddenly becomes much more difficult to defend. Opponents won't be able to focus on stopping just one element because every decision creates another